Hey, what's up, Kyle?
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited. Um, you have this calming you have a very calming presence. We've known each other for what, 2.5 years now.
Yeah.
I call you my friend just because it makes me feel good because I want more people like you in my life. Um, Folks that don't know Kyle Jepson, uh, introduce yourself and just tell people what are you up to right now?
So many things. I'm Kyle Jepson. Most of my internet notoriety comes from the work I do at HubSpot. Very lucky to have Mark as a colleague, and yeah, the friendship thing is mutual. Mark,
Okay,
no
okay,
need
all
to
right.
add any disclaimers to that. I mean, we went on a road trip through Wisconsin together, and we bonded.
Yes.
But yeah, I do a lot of educational stuff. I do mostly short form video content for HubSpot. That's my square job. At home, I'm married. I have 4 kids, age 1 through almost 11 now, and I'm a bishop at my Latter-day Saint congregation. And as though that was not enough things to juggle, I have been developing an animated musical about Joan of Arc. I'm not an animator. I'm not a musician, but this is a big dream, and it's been taking me crazy places. And I'm really excited to be here and talk about something other than HubSpot. I love HubSpot. Happy to talk about HubSpot all day, but let's talk about some other stuff.
I just want to say it out loud again. You are putting together an animated musical about Joan of Arc. Side note, you're not a producer, you're not a director, you're not an animator.
No.
You literally were just like, I think this should happen. And you're now just, it's happening. And because, like you said, your internet notoriety, thousands and thousands of people know you, like you, love you, follow you, listen to your advice, go to you for education. And now that whole world is here to help you, right? Like I always tell people want to help. You just have to let them know what you need help with. And you were like, hey, hashtag Joan deserves a musical.
Joan deserves a musical. Yeah.
So the hashtag is Joan deserves a musical, and you're literally it's happening. You're having meetings. There's like producers involved. There's a composer I think involved making songs, and it's just amazing. There's a lot that we need to get to before we get to that. And so because I know you, because we did spend time on a road trip through Wisconsin, we spoke at a conference together, which was amazing. I want to just go back, man. I want to start because I know these stories that exist throughout your life, these chapters of sorts that you've told me about. You grew up in Northern California, yeah?
In the middle part of California. This is not obviously a big discussion point, but I constantly need to get this off my chest. I grew up in California. I went to school in Utah, and I learned in Utah I don't like Californians because Californians get together and they're like, man, everything's better in California. Like, I really liked Utah. And they're like, oh, you're from California? Are you from Northern California or Southern California? I'd be like, I'm from a town called Tehachapi, just outside Bakersfield. And the people from like the Bay Area would be like, oh, that's Southern California. And so I'd be like, okay, I'm from Southern California. And the people from San Diego would be like, no, that's Northern California. Like, okay. And so then I was like, maybe I'm from Central California. One day a guy from Fresno was like, are you from the Valley? If you're not from the Valley, it's not Central California. So Californians don't want to claim me. And so I don't claim, no, I live in Boston now. I've been here 11 years. I'm from Boston. Nobody cares if it's Northern or Southern or Central Boston. I'm from Boston, and that's what I claim.
You know, there's like that happens. Like, Chicago's the same way. People are like, where are you from? You're Chicago. Oh, where in Chicago? Like, oh, I'm from like Schaumburg. It's like a suburb. They're like, you're not from Chicago. You must, is it a Chicago zip code? It's like, it's this thing. It's this identity thing.
We are so excited to find ways to exclude other people, and I don't understand it.
I don't care. And so you spent time in Utah. You went to college in Utah. And I know that your faith, your religious faith is a big part of your life. Like you said, you're an active in your church. You spent time after college, I believe. I don't know. Is it on a mission? Is that what it's called?
Oh, yeah. Wow, you know so many things about me. It was actually between high school and college. I spent 2 years as a missionary. It's funny. My title at HubSpot now is evangelist, and that's basically what I did for my church for 2 years in Idaho before I moved to Utah and went to college. So yeah.
And so again, people that are listening, as you start to build this, you can tell Kyle has energy and passion. He's honest, he's kind, he's genuine. Just again, side note. Kyle is celebrity in the world of software, right? In the world of HubSpot, you are a celebrity. In many ways, you're the face of this 8,000 person company. People, as soon as they kind of interact with this product, this thing we make, they see your face. And the first time we met in person, I had walked into this large conference. It's like a 15,000 person conference. And you were sitting on the floor on your laptop with a backpack. Now, there was a bench next to you. You could have sat on, you were sitting on the floor, and I look over.
I needed to charge. I need to be closer to the outlet.
And I'm like, I look over, I'm like, is that him? Like, we've been on Zooms. I'm like, hey, Kyle? And you're like, I'm like, dude, this, again, for context, this is like if you went to an NBA event and Michael Jordan was just sitting on the floor checking his email at the check-in booth. I was like, what are you doing? So your humbleness, your genuineness, your empathy, your love, your passion, it all comes through, but it comes from a really interesting place, right? You come from this place of faith. You spent these 2 years as an evangelist, traveling through Idaho, spreading the word of religion. And you had some really interesting things that happened through there. You told me this story about you were having dinner at someone's house.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Tell the people about why this dinner was so impactful.
Yeah. So I as a missionary, I was 19 and 20 years old. And I knew this mission was going to be 2 years long. And afterward, I was going to have to go home and make a life for myself. I intended to go to college, but I had no idea why I wanted to study. Wanted a job. I'd always had aspirations to get married and have kids. And like, I wanted to be able to support that. Right. But I had no idea. The world just seemed wide open. I didn't know what to do. And so as I met people, as I talked with them, I always asked them, like, what do you do for work? And how did you get into that? And there's this one conversation, the one Marc's referencing. I was at just dinner at the home of some people whose congregation I was serving in. And it was a nice house in a new suburb of Boise. They were clearly doing fine. And I asked I don't remember what the woman did, but the man, when I talked to him, I said, what do you do for work? And he came alive, and he's like, I got the best job in the world. I work at the Albertsons grocery store corporate offices, and I draw schematics for the layout of Hostess products on store shelves nationwide. Like, I get marketing and sales information. How are the ho-hos performing? How are the ding-dongs doing? And I decide which ones go at eye level and which ones go down at the floor and how many shelf inches each product gets. And I draw schematics and blueprints, and I ship them off to stores. And those guys who stock the shelves, they stock the shelves using the plans I created. And for me, it's just like, that is bonkers, right? Like, how is this a job? But the big realization I had was, if this guy loves his job, and who am I to judge him for that, right? Like, if you're happy, that's awesome. And like, what is my real aspiration except to have a job I'm happy with that enables me to own a home like you own, right? And the other thing I realized in that moment was, this can't be a job he aspired to. There's no way as a kindergartner when the teacher was like, Tommy, what do you want to be when you grow up? He was like, I'm going to draw schematics of, it's just like, that's not a thing. And even in college, when he was getting a degree in business or marketing or whatever it is, he probably didn't know this job existed. It had to be a case of one thing led to another. And then he landed in this position that he just loved, right? And as he described it, even though for me it was like, that sounds like a horrible death, he was so alive and so passionate about it. And I'm really grateful to that man, whose name I don't even remember at this point, because it just taught me some things in life you can't plan for.
Yeah.
You can have your principles, you can have your goals, you can know what you want out of life. But the big secret, I think, is to not get too caught up in, I'm going to do thing A and then thing B, and that's going to lead to thing C. You got to keep yourself open to opportunities. You gotta take a leap occasion to try something that you weren't expecting if it comes along. And eventually one thing will lead to another. And hopefully that brings you to a much better place than you possibly could have planned on. And because I'm a religious person, this is all kind of underlined by this idea that this is a benevolent universe we live in, right? There is a divine and loving figure out there who is guiding us along. And so it's okay if I don't have a full plan. It's okay if I don't know how everything's going to work out. As long as I hold to my principles and I'm keeping my priorities straight, it's not going to be possible for me to steer too far astray. This isn't to say bad things won't happen in life. Certainly, I've encountered setbacks that I didn't hope for, but even those, like, you learn from, and if nothing else, you get a deeper degree of empathy for other people who suffer, and eventually it works out right. And so I don't know. There's a lot to be said for people who, like, all through high school and college are like, I'm going to be an accountant. I'm going to work at one of the top firms and I'm going to make this figure, 2 years out of college. And like, if you can pull it off and if you can get true satisfaction out of life, I'm not going to judge you. But maybe that's not the best way for everyone to find satisfaction in life. Right. And so my life is kind of just, there was once we did an activity. This is before you joined the team, Mark, but at HubSpot Academy, where Mark and I both worked, there was a team building exercise we did once where we each had to describe our life in 6 words. Like if you wrote an autobiography and the title was 6 words, what would it be? And mine was, wait, am I really doing this? And wait, am I really doing this is my whole life. And that was long before I ever started thinking about Joan of Arc. Every day with this Joan of Arc project is like, wait, am I really doing this?
Am I meeting with producers? Is somebody?
Right. Yeah. It's just like, is this real? But yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for not over planning your life.
Do you think that you talked about like your faith lets you know there's a benevolence to the world, and that you have these guiding principles? And as I hear you talk about that, and as I learn more about you and get to know you more, there's an openness to you. There's this idea of like being open to what the world might bring your way, being open to new possibilities, not having everything planned out. Would you say like most of that does come from religion? Is part of it just Kyle being Kyle? Was it something that was modeled for you as a kid? Is it something that your wife kind of brought to you? Like, where does this openness come from? Because as a parent, we know the challenges of raising kids, and we know that it's financial, we know that it's emotional, we know that it's spiritual, it's all these things. And so where does this openness to new opportunities come from for you?
That's a great question. I never thought about it. I feel like my faith justifies it. If I ever feel like, oh, wait, whoa, I'm being a little too optimistic here. I'm like, no, I believe in my core that optimism is warranted. Hope is justified by default. But as far as how I came to be this way, that's a really interesting question. I don't know if this is the actual answer, but you ask if it was modeled for me by my parents.
Right.
My parents lived a very different sort of life than I have been able to live. My dad faced a lot of very serious health problems when I was a kid and wasn't able to hold a job. And that was not plan A for my family. My mom, who didn't even have a college degree, had to really work and scrape to keep our family afloat. And so there wasn't a lot of this opportunity and serendipity in their life. But I remember a story my dad's told me several times. He said, I forget where he was working, but before I was born, he was working someplace. And as he was driving to work one day, it was a super hot day. And he was driving by this house or this building that was being re-roofed. And there were workers up in the hot sun laying tar shingles. And as he drove by, he was like, that's a job I will never do. And then 3 weeks later or whatever, his company shut down and he went and got a job laying tar shingles. Because that's all he could get, right? And he would tell me this story, and it was really it was sort of this somber never say never, but also I think an underlying message of you're not too good for any job, And I'm a guy who I worked my way through college, right? My parents couldn't afford to help me. And so I worked a couple different janitorial jobs. I've worked in fast food, and I think my professional life kind of started out with this feeling of, if I can get a job, I'm lucky, right? The world doesn't owe me anything. And I actually, honestly, one of the favorite jobs I've ever had was one of those janitorial jobs. I had this supervisor I worked with that I just loved, and we would hang out in these dirty dorm bathrooms, and we'd be scrubbing toilets, and we would just talk about life. And I swear, I have the closest I've ever come to achieving Zen has been when I've been Cinderella scrubbing staircases, right? There's just something to be said for that kind of work.
Yeah.
And I think to come out of college with this viewpoint of, I'll see what I can do. I'm not afraid to try anything. Eventually turned into this. That doesn't mean I have to take jobs I hate, right? What if I can try anything and get jobs I like? And that's been a delightful transformation throughout my adult life.
Man, so, the answer's in there, right? The answer, I'm no psychologist or whatever, but your upbringing undoubtedly and your faith, those are 2 huge factors that contribute to this mindset that you have around work, optimism, hope, the ability to be open to things. And you are right. Gritty, hard work is the greatest thing that people can ever do. To then appreciate, either to appreciate the zen that does come from a repetitive task like that, and
Yes.
or to be like, I've done that. And at the other end of the work spectrum is like kind of the work we're doing now, right? Like it's a different type of work, but it makes you appreciate the hard work that you've put in. Man, I had a friend I made. He was the custodian at the school I first started working at. And I would tell you that the 3 years I spent with that guy after school hanging out, I think zen is the best word.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think Ron McCombs. Oh my goodness, Ron McCombs, if you are listening in Central Illinois, brother, you are a huge influence on my life.
No, I think there's a groundedness among people who make a living that way. Like, I love working at HubSpot. I love working in tech. This is the second tech company I've worked at, and there's this energy and this optimism and this adaptability and this freedom and this we can do anything kind of sense that I think is fantastic, and it's where I prefer to be. But so much of who I am comes from the earlier jobs I had, right?
100%.
And like I had a job once unloading semi truck trailers into a warehouse during the summer in Utah when it's like 95 degrees outside and I swear 250 degrees inside the truck trailer, right? And like you just have this brothers at arms feeling with the people who are in it with you. And there were language barriers, but it didn't matter. Like, we were there sweating together, and those are sacred experiences for me.
I love that you actually call out that they are experiences. There's people and there's experiences, right? And that experience kind of encapsulates the work, the grit, the bond, all of that. And I think that, like, man, I just saw this thing and it was like, when we think, what is it? The things that matter most in life are not things. There's people, there's places, there's experiences that we have. Those are the things that, you know, as parents, we hope our kids, like, we know that hard work is good, but we don't want to see our kids struggle. But we know, like, I don't want to see them in pain struggling, but we know on the other side of that challenge, that pain, that grit, that work, that's where life happens, right? All right. So anyway, we are on a mission. You meet the hostess guy. You go to college, you work your way through college as a janitor. You try stand-up comedy, right? You go to an open mic, you're trying some stand-up comedy. And one night at one of these stand-up comedy shows, there's like a little comment bowl. People can leave a comment on a piece of paper, and you decide to dig into the comment bowl. And Kyle Jepson, what do you find in the comment bowl this fateful night?
So there's all these little 3x5 cards people have written things on. Didn't like this joke. More from this guy, you know. And there's one that says, Kyle Jepson, will you marry me? XOXO Heart Katie, with a phone number on it. And I thought for sure, this is just college stand-up on campus. I'm sure one of the other comedians is pranking me. And I asked them all, and none of them have written it. And so they're all like, well, you should probably call her. And then I have this moment of like, well, maybe this phone number goes to someone named Katie, but maybe she wasn't even at the show, right? Maybe some roommate, or maybe like some ex-boyfriend or something is like just trying to get at her in some way. And so I call and I get voicemail and it says, this is Katie's phone. Like, okay, well, so far so good. And I just left the longest voicemail I've ever left in my life, where I'm just trying to explain the situation, who I am and why I'm calling. And it's okay if you didn't write this card, but I thought I better call just in case you did. And here's my phone number. And she called me back. And she said, hey, this is Katie. I was like, oh, hi, this is Kyle. And she's like, so I wrote that card. I was like, wow, I have a lot of respect for you because you're really bold. And she said, yeah, it's a blessing and a curse. And I was like, yeah, I can imagine. There's this awkward pause. And I said, so what happens now? And she said, well, I put myself out there. What are you going to do about it? And I was like, well, there was a Jamba Juice on campus. I was like, how about some afternoon we meet up, Jamba Juice. We'll both just bring ourselves there. We can both stay as long as we're having a good time. Nobody's relying on anyone else for a ride. I'll pay, and it'll be just a casual meeting. And so we both met up. It was really just a joke. She was just having fun. She was expecting just to get a funny story out of it. I had no idea what she was going to be like. She was going to be some crazy person. But we sat and talked and drank Jamba Juice. We ended up hanging out for like 4 hours. Just really hit it off. And we have talked either in person or on the phone every day since then, except for the day right after. The day right after, we were both like, okay, let's not go crazy.
There's like a scene in that famous movie Swingers where like you got to wait 3 days before you call. If she calls you mad, you're trying to play the game, but you don't want to play the game. Oh, okay.
Yeah, but we've been married. We got married in 2010. So we've been 14 years now. We got 4 kids. Own our own home in Boston. The hostess dream is coming true.
So you meet your wife through a comment card at an open mic at a comedy show. We know that you spent time. You said you worked at a software company. You found your way to HubSpot. You worked your way, through the company. And so here's an interesting thing, right? We know that in your faith that you do this 2-year mission, right? And in that there's kind of like this inherent, I would assume, this inherent ability to be like, I'm out there, I'm talking to strangers, I'm trying to just have, that's almost like sales training in some way, right? Yeah. So it's like, how do we talk to people? How do you deal with rejection? There's all these like micro lessons that are kind of coming up through as you do this. And you, again, just knowing you, like you're a kind, open, genuine person. And then you find yourself at the software company, you start making content, right? Videos that are going out online. I know when I first got introduced to HubSpot, you were the guy. I went to the HubSpot Academy and I was like, oh, this guy seems awesome, dude. It seems like I'm just like learning from like a guy, like a nice guy. And through you trying to help people, I think that's really the thing here is like you started making like these daily videos that were going to be helpful to people, right? Updates about product that are happening, and you started making these videos. People found it so helpful. You started building this like legitimate following. And I say following not in a way that we follow like a Kardashian, right? But people were like, ooh, what he's doing is good. It's really helpful to me. He's the guy. I'm just going to follow what he does so I stay informed. And then there's this other part there, Kyle, which is I think some people in that situation where you're like, ooh, I have thousands and thousands of people that are listening to what I say would be like, wow, I got a lot going on. You still respond to every email, every chat, every DM. Like you are there just to talk to people and help them. And through that genuine kind of nature of your work, now people are willing to help you with this Joan of Arc, this hashtag Joan deserves a musical. How did the Joan deserves a musical thing happen?
Yeah. So this story is just wild top to bottom. We've already covered some wild stuff. It doesn't get more wild than this. So about a year and a half ago, I'm sitting at dinner with my wife and 3 kids at the time. Baby hadn't been born yet. And for whatever reason, I am telling my children the plot of the classic film Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, which is this 80s comedy about a couple of loser high school guys. They're about to flunk out. They have to pass their history final presentation if they're going to graduate high school. And so they get a time machine.
San Dimas High. That was the school,
right?
Right?
Yeah, San Dimas High. Right. Yep. And they have to get a time machine. And they have to go kidnap historical figures and bring them on stage as basically part of a book report. And they get an A and they pass it. And so I'm telling this story to my kids. And there's one part where I don't remember why, but they bring all these historical figures to the mall. I think the prompt they've been given by their teacher is like, what would these historical figures think if they saw San Dimas today? And so they're like, well, let's just show them the mall. And so, I'm describing this to my kids. Genghis Khan is destroying the athletics store with a baseball bat. Beethoven is in the music store playing like multiple different synthesizers. Joan of Arc is leading like a Pilates class. And my daughter asked me, she's like 6 or 7 at this time. She says, who's Joan of Arc? And I'm like, she was French soldier girl. I got burned at the stake, I think, for some reason. Like, I did not know anything, literally nothing about Joan of Arc. But as fate would have it, just a week or 2 earlier, we had been at our local branch of the Boston Public Library, and they were disposing of an entire set of encyclopedias. It was World Book, like 2019. These are not old books, right? And they were just going to throw them away. And so I loaded them up in our car and we brought them home. And there's this shelf in our dining room, and it's just like a whole shelf is now World Book encyclopedias. And so I said, Nora, this is why we have encyclopedias. Let us not turn to the internet. Let us not pull out our phones and devices. Let us just grab the volume marked J and see what we can learn about Joan of Arc. Right? And so I pull it out right there at the dinner table, and it's just like a little 2-column synopsis. and very sterile, right? This is an encyclopedia entry. There's nothing fantastical about it, but it's just like the 100-Year War has been going on for like 90 years between England and France. The peasant girl, a teenager named Joan, felt the divine voices were calling her to lead the armies of France to victory. She went to the leader of the local French garrison and said, hey, you need to send me the king to put me in charge of the armies. And it says, at first he laughed at her, but then he decided to send her. And I was like, well, that's weird. Why would he do that? And then it's like, she gets to the king and she says, hey, you should put me in charge of the armies. And the king at first was hesitant, but then he decided to give her a try. And I was like, also strange. What is this? And it's like, and the armies were at first resentful to follow a teenage girl with no war experience into war, but she quickly won them over. Like, how is any of this story makes no sense? And then it hit me. Wait, this story does make sense. It's a musical, right? If each one of these is like an Alan Menken song like we had during the Disney Renaissance, we'll totally come around, right? Here comes our spunky female protagonist, and she's like, hey, send me the king. And the big bad soldier's like, no. And then she's like, send me to the king. And then he's like, okay. And we as the audience are like, yeah, send her to the king, right? And it's just like, this needs to be an animated musical. That's the only way this story makes any sense. And this was like a funny idea I was amusing myself with, but as we've established, no connection to the film industry at all. Right. No musical abilities to speak of, certainly not an animator. I have, throughout my life, been a writer. I've written several novels. My most recent one was rejected by over 200 literary agents. So I'm a frustrated novelist, right? And I'm having this idea. And so oh shoot, Mark, I'm so sorry. My battery's about to die. I'm going to go grab my charger.
Oh, good. Hold on.
Man, what a time to get interrupted.
Good, buddy.
Okay, now it will not die. That is, whew. See that little red warning light, and I panicked. So anyway,
yeah. So we'll bring it back in. You were talking about how no experience. You know, what are you gonna do? And we'll bring it in 3, 2, 1.
So I'm not the guy to take on a project like this. I have no qualifications. But the idea just kind of keeps nagging at me. And I've heard stories about Lin-Manuel Miranda. This is why he wrote Hamilton, right? He read a biography of Hamilton. He's like, this should be a Broadway musical. And I mean, he had the advantage of being Lin-Manuel Miranda. He could write really great songs. I have nothing except a tragic career as a would-be novelist. But I go back to my local branch of the Boston Public Library and I check out a book about Joan, just a biography of her life, to see if this idea holds up. I'm like, maybe if you zoom in on the details, the whole musical idea, it just is ludicrous, right? Mm-hmm. But I read this biography, and I came away with two very passionate opinions. One is absolutely this should be a musical, and it's crazy nobody's done that yet. And the other is it's really unfortunate that the only thing I knew about Joan is that she got burned at the stake, because that's sort of irrelevant, right? If you imagine, like, if you talk to someone and you were like, hey, have you heard of Abraham Lincoln? And they'd be like, oh yeah, was he the guy who got shot at the theater? You'd be like, you don't really know who Abraham Lincoln is, do you?
There's more to the story, right?
Yeah. And like she had this incredible military career. It was short. It was only like a year. But she led France to victory. The king of France hadn't been able to get crowned because the coronation city was in enemy hands, and she cleared the way and she got him crowned. And after that, at the coronation, she bowed down in front of him and said, my mission is complete. It's now your job to save France. I'm out of here. But then some of her military friends were like, hey, Paris is still held by the English. Do you want to help us go retake it? And she was like, yeah, sure. I don't really feel like going back to my farm. So she goes to Paris, and that's when she gets kidnapped, and then she gets burned at the stake. But that's like, I feel like that our fixation on her tragic death has really undermined our ability to appreciate just how inspirational a figure she is. And she was a feisty teenager, right? One of the priests who questioned her was from like a rural part of France and spoke with some sort of accent. And he asked her, what language do these voices speak to you in? I think trying to get at, do they speak in Latin? Do they speak in French? And her answer was, better French than you do. And it just like, she's a teenager, right? She's a teenage girl. And if you took any teenage girl you know with that spunk and that fire and put her in charge of the armies, that is exactly the story this is. It is fun, it is funny, it is upbeat, it is kind of crazy, but it's a true story. And so I just really fell in love with this idea of this needs to be like a family-friendly musical, right? This is an inspirational true story. Music's going to really help with the storytelling. And so I've been working towards that now for for a couple of years. And it's interesting working on the story of Joan of Arc because there have been so many times I've been stuck one way or another. And I thought, well, you know, it's fun while it lasted, but who am I to think I could have made this thing anyway? Not an animator, not in the film industry. And I remember like, but I'm telling the true story of a farm girl with no military experience who saved the country of France, right? Like,
there's a similarity there, right?
Talking about things that are impossible. That's way more impossible than like a college-educated white dude getting a movie made, right? That story happens all the time, and so like, yeah, it's a story. It's a story I'm unable to give up on. Because it's sort of self-perpetuating. It shames me into continuing to work on it.
She did this, I can do this.
Right, yeah.
So you're on this journey, right? And again, just to bring it back, you are raising, with your lovely wife, you're raising 4 kids.
Yeah.
You are working full time.
Yeah.
You are, what's the title at your church?
I'm a bishop.
You're a bishop at your church. And you're trying to make this animated musical about Joan of Arc happen all at the same time.
Yeah.
That in and of itself just speaks to the drive, the openness to the universe, trying to just have a life of Seth Godin, who's like an amazing author. I love his stuff. You know, this marketing. He talks a lot about like living a life of projects. And I think that that's a thing here, right? Is like you try the stand-up comedy, you have these different jobs, you know, but it's like this life of projects. Projects are just great. And they give us like this drive, and there's an intensity to projects. You know, they're more, could be sprints, maybe more so than marathons. I know you've been documenting a lot of this on your LinkedIn page, but you also have a YouTube channel where you are kind of giving these updates about where you're at in the process. So we'll tell everybody at the end, just go Google Kyle Jepson and find the YouTube channel, subscribe, watch the updates. If you're on LinkedIn, definitely follow Kyle. You'll find more. You can also just search the hashtag Joan Deserves a Musical. But where are you at in the process right now? Like where are we at now? What are the next steps? Kind of where are we at?
Yeah. So, I mean, I got this idea, and I don't know what to do with it, right? Like every creative endeavor I've ever done, anytime I'm like, oh, I have an idea for a novel, I just sit down and do it myself. This is a project that will not let me do that, right? Where are the songs going to come from? Who's going to turn it into a movie? And so at the point where I was kind of wrapping up my research. I read 3 or 4 full books about Joan and watched a bunch of documentary videos and things. And I had kind of my outline of this is the scope of the story, here where the songs go. But I learned as part of my research the process for animated musicals being made, especially during the Disney Renaissance, because that's really my model. And I found an interview with Alan Menken, who did all the music for those musicals. And someone asked him, like, what's the process? How does this happen? He's like, well, I'll tell you how it happened for Hunchback of Notre Dame, right? Disney decided they want to do Hunchback of Notre Dame. They all read the novel, and they're like, well, there are these scary parts and the sad ending, and we'll cut those out, but here's kind of the scope of it. And they give that to me, and they say, Alan, write us as many songs as you want. And so I look at their notes, and I write songs, and I write like 10 or 12 songs, more songs than they need, and I give it to them, and then they take those to the storyboarders, and they put the songs in the order they want. They storyboard some connective tissue to give it a cohesive story, and then the script is the thing that comes last. And I heard that, and I was like, uh-oh, I'm writing the script first. That sounds like this might be backwards, right? So basically what I took away from that is I got to get a songwriter as early as possible. Otherwise, this thing is just never going to come together. I was like, I don't know any songwriters. I don't know how to find a songwriter. I assume any songwriter worth their salt is going to want to charge me lots of money, and I have no money for this. And so I was kind of wringing my hands over it. And I was like, well, what do I know about Joan? I know she was devoutly Catholic. I know she was a young woman. Maybe I can find a devoutly Catholic woman who writes songs, right? And so I just Googled minor Catholic pop stars. I put minor in there because I know, like, I'm never going to get in contact with Sarah Bareilles, right? Like, that's just not going to happen. But I found this listicle, this blog post someone had written that was like 50 Catholic recording artists to add to your worship playlist. And it was like, name, embedded YouTube video, name, embedded YouTube video, name, embedded YouTube video. So one night while I'm washing dishes, I'm just hitting play on every YouTube video for a female Catholic singer, right? And some are good and some are not so good. Some are like really pensive and beautiful, but like I want something that makes you snap your fingers, right?
Yeah.
And down near the bottom, I think maybe it was alphabetical, I don't know. This woman, Amanda Vernon, comes up and I hit play on her video and I'm washing dishes. And I just stopped washing dishes, like dried my hands on my pants and came over. It's like, I must know who this voice belongs to. Because it was just, she sang with such passion. And I was just like, I don't know if she can write musical style music, but if my audience can feel when the end credits roll, if they feel in their hearts what I'm feeling right now just listening to this one song, we will have achieved victory, right? And so I look her up, and she's a mom of 4 kids. I'm a dad of 4 kids. She's supporting her family as a full-time recording artist. She like tours to Catholic youth camps, and that's how she makes her living, right? Wow. And so I go to her website, and she has a contact us form. It's like, would you like to book me for an event? And I was like, well, kind of.
More than an event.
Yeah. And so like, I'm trying to type something in this little, but contact us boxes, right? You get like 100 words or something, right? There's no way I could capture it. So I do what my HubSpot training has taught me to do, and I recorded a video. I just sat down with my webcam and I talked. I was gonna make a short video. I was like, yeah, I bet I can describe this in 2 or 3 minutes. 10-minute video comes out of this, and I share a link to it. And in her contact us form, I just wrote something like, I have sort of an unconventional request. I figure a short video is better than a long email. Click this link and let me know if you have any questions. And I used a program called Vidyard to host the video. And so I sent it on like a Friday, and Saturday morning it has 1 view, and Sunday morning it has a 2nd view. And I'm like, what's going to happen? And then Monday, her husband / agent reaches out to me, is like, I watched the video. Amanda watched the video. We both liked it. She'd like to set up a Zoom call. So we set up a Zoom call, and I tell her the whole story, like even the drying my hands on my pants, like here's why we're here, right? And she was like, well, now let me tell you a story. I don't know how you found me, but Joan of Arc is my lifelong childhood hero. I've read a plain novelization of her life multiple times. I went to this college in Wisconsin where they have a medieval French chapel that's been moved brick by brick from France to the United States that it's believed Joan prayed in. And inside that chapel, they have a life-size statue of Joan. And when my dad and mom dropped me off at college, my first day of school, my dad put his hand on Joan's head and said, Amanda, just be this. And she said, Kyle, my whole life, I've been trying to figure out what I can do to be more like Joan of Arc. I've wanted to use my art to do some sort of tribute to her, but have come up empty-handed. You now say you're making a musical about her, and for whatever reason tapped me. If you have a plan for this, I'm in. And I'm like, awesome. She's like, so what's the plan? Do you have an animation studio? And I was like, no.
But this is it. You and me right now. This is it in my kitchen. This is what I got.
And so she was like, well, maybe you should work on that, right? And then about this time, our 4th kid, my baby, was born. And HubSpot's very generous with parental leave. Mm-hmm. I got 16 weeks of paid parental leave. And during that time, or in the lead up to that time, I reached out. I found an animation studio here in Boston. I reached out to them. I was like, hey, can you make an animated musical? And they're like, no way, never. We're like a 4-person team. That's way too big of a project. But I talked with one of their animators, and he was like, oh, yeah, what are you looking for? It's like, I'd love traditional 2D animation, hand-drawn like we had in the Disney Renaissance. He's like, oh, well, if you want that, there's this studio up in Montreal. They're the best in the world at hand-drawn animation. They're the ones you should really be talking to. I'm like, well, you know, filling out contact us forms seems to be going really well for me, so I'll just do that. So I filled out
again.
Yeah, I filled out another contact us form. They got back to me. They were like, do you have a sample of what you're looking to make? And I was like, sure. And I wrote a quick script to just like a 5-page scene and sent it to them. And then I end up on this Zoom call with an executive producer, and he's like, hey, did you write that script? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, did you write it all by yourself? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I wrote it. It's just for you. Nobody else has even seen it. I'm sorry. It's the first draft. It may not be very good. And he's like, no, it was good. I really liked it. I'm pretty impressed. You understand the pacing of an animated movie. I feel like if you could write a full script like this, it'd be really good. I was like, oh, cool. Well, kind of what I'm thinking is if I can get you to produce like a 5-minute proof of concept like this, maybe then I could go find funders or something to make the full thing. And he was like, okay, well, yeah. For the scene you sent us, for us to animate it would cost about $250,000. And I, poker face. Oh, really? Interesting. Okay. That's cheap. Yeah. And he was like, no offense, but you don't really strike me as a person who has $250,000 that you wouldn't rather spend on something else. And I was like, well, yeah, you got me there. Maybe buy a second house or something.
Yeah.
And he was like, but something we don't advertise on our website for obvious reasons is we are a full production company. Occasionally we acquire the rights to projects we're interested in and just produce them ourselves. Is that a conversation you'd be interested in having? I was like, whoa, pause. My options are I can pay you $250,000 and get 5 minutes of animation that I then try to shop around myself, or you pay me money and you make the whole thing. And he was like, yeah, are you open to that? And I was like, yeah, I'd be pretty open to that. And so I'm on parental leave now, right? I'm not going to work on a daily basis. My most important job is just like snuggle a brand new baby. So I am just writing as hard as I can, trying to get some sort of full script written. And I'm going back and forth with him over email, and he keeps like raising concerns. What about this? Oh, it seems kind of dark. What about that? And I'm working on it. And we get to like the fall, the summer is over, and I'm headed back to work. And finally I get an email from him. He's like, look, Kyle, I can see you're committed to this project. I really admire your dedication. You're doing great things. But a project like this can't come together in just a matter of a few months. I want you to take a pause, work on it, get some input from some other people besides me, and see if you can bring this thing to life. And don't feel bad. Like I said, we don't acquire things very often. It is in no way I don't mean to diminish your efforts or quality here by telling you we're not moving forward with this. And so I responded to him like, okay, great. I will absolutely do that. I'm dedicated to this project. But just to be clear, when I get it to a place that I feel it's ready for production, I should not come back to you. You are passing on the project. And he responded, no, absolutely not.
Okay.
If you get it to work, I think it could be brilliant. And I would love to revisit this. And I was like, okay. So then it's really time for me to get my songwriter to do something, right? I have placeholders in the script for where the song should go, but I don't know what the songs are going to sound like. And as I just said, I learned from Alan Menken, the songs are supposed to come first. And so I reach out to Amanda, and I'm like, hey, I've got an animation studio. They're very encouraging, but we need songs. And she comes back and she's like, Kyle, I do this for a living. I can't just write songs for free. I was like, great, just give me a quote for, I think it's going to be 7 songs. How much would that cost? And we start putting together this Kickstarter, right? We think it's going to be like $20,000 or $30,000 to create, write and produce and record these songs. And we're thinking maybe we could release it as like a short run podcast or something, an album. I don't know. And then she just goes into radio silence for a little bit. We are just moments away from hitting publish on this Kickstarter page, and she disappears on me. I'm like, what is going on? And I get this email from her, and she's like, Kyle, I have some very somber news I'd like to share with you. I'm deciding to end my career as a professional recording artist. My husband's going to go back to work. He's going to support the family. I'm going to be home with the kids for a while. Lots of things have contributed to this. It's a conversation we've been having a long time. And it's just, that's where we've landed. And then she said, and so since I'm no longer a professional recording artist, I can do stuff for fun. And this is a project I'd love to just do for fun. Let's forget the Kickstarter and just get started. Oh. And I was like, wow, so many emotions, right? And so she goes to work and starts writing songs for me for free. She is working on this as a passion project in the same way I am. And over the course of the first half of this year, 2024, she's written me 7 fully original songs that are just great. And we'll like meet over Zoom and she'll perform them for me. And we'll like talk back and forth about, well, maybe we need to sprinkle some dialogue in between these verses and stuff. And then I go back and I revise the script because like, oh, now the song goes in a slightly different place or it says different things or there's duplications or gaps or whatever. We've just been revising and revising and revising. And now in August of 2024, the script is finalized. I feel so good about it. I think it's really solid. The songs are all finalized. They're really, they're ready to go. And I have a lunch appointment with this executive producer in Montreal for Labor Day. I'm going to drive up there and we're going to chat and I'm going to lay it all on him. This is ready for your review. Bring your hardest questions. We're ready for it. But the final crazy thing that happened is kind of end of July, I tell Amanda, hey, I've got this appointment, this lunch date with this executive producer. And she was like, I've got an idea. What if we do a quick fundraising round to see if we can raise $4,000 or $5,000 so I can get a studio and some professional singers and we record demos of all the songs with actual, men for the men's parts and women for the women's parts. And I was like, the main thing I've learned from this project is don't say no, right? We are really testing the limits of my ability to keep myself open to opportunities. I refuse to be the person who stands in the way of this project. So I'm not going to tell her no, right? I was like, okay, let's try it. And this is where kind of what you led with comes back. I've been spending a couple of years at HubSpot, just really empowering the HubSpot community as much as I can, trying to be a source of answers for them, a resource for learning. And now comes time for a fundraiser. that has nothing to do with HubSpot. And I publish it on my LinkedIn page, and I say, hey, friends, this has nothing to do with HubSpot. I don't know how any of you care about musicals or cartoons or Joan of Arc or anything else, but this is a project I've been working on for a while. If you can donate, $5, $2, $1, that'd be really great. We're trying to get $4,000 or $5,000 here. See how far we can get. And we hit $4,000 in 24 hours. So we raised the goal to 5,000, and we had that by the end of the next day. And then people were not making $2, $5 donations, right? We hit $5,600 something when we finally shut it down. And it was just over 100 donors. Our average donation was above $50.
Man.
We had plenty of people who were given $200 and $300 donations, and it just bowled me over. But it was really an affirmation of this idea that when you put good things out in the world, good things come back to you, right? This community, who I honestly, some of them, hopefully one of them really is just a huge Joan of Arc fan, and they're really excited about this project because of the project itself, right? But I think a lot of them are just they are happy to help me because I've been helpful to them, which is awe-inspiring to see. I've never tried to quantify in any way the amount of good I've done in the HubSpot ecosystem, right? Like, I certainly never tried to put a dollar value on it, but here, at least 100 people were willing to pay $50+ to this passion project that, honestly, it's possible it never amounts to anything, right? Success is not guaranteed despite how well this has been going. And it's totally possible that I go and this executive producer is like, hey, you tried, but it's not that great. And I'm never able to find a home for it, right? As a person who's been rejected so many times with my novels, I recognize there's a non-zero chance of that happening. And yet people still are willing to believe and take a leap with me. And that's just really, it's incredible. It's awe-inspiring to see the kindness and the support and the friendship that comes from people who have only ever really seen me as a person on LinkedIn who's talking about HubSpot.
Kyle, love you, buddy. I just love you, man. If you think about people that might be on a similar path as you, meaning they're trying to produce a movie, right? It'd be a very different path, right? Your faith, your experiences, the scrubbing of toilets, the stand-up comedy, the doing good for others, all of this has come together to give you a really unique perspective on how to bring this project to life, right? You thought about doing it, you just kind of put it out in the world. You took a chance, you watch this YouTube video, and look what happened from it. And so as I think about, one pathway is people might come, I'm going to raise as much money as I can. Like I'm going to drill this in the ground until and you're just like, hey, let's just see what happens. Let's be humble. Let's be grateful. Let's be thankful. Let's take people along the ride with us. It is the way that you approach and how you do it and why you do it that is going to make what you do so amazing. I'm confident we're going to see it continue to evolve and continue to grow. So it sounds like next steps are demos are being recorded. And then there's going to be this big meeting up in Montreal where obviously we're going to promote the heck out of your meeting and get a flash mob outside with Joan of Arc signs, like to be out there to promote.
That sounds good.
So how do you feel about all this?
It's crazy to think about. And one thing, I mean, I don't know your listeners. I have no idea who exactly is going to download and listen to this precise episode. But I hope there are some dreamers out there, some creative types, some people who want to make a movie or want to get a novel published. It's crazy to think about this path being so smooth and so expedited for me when I know there are hundreds of people who are like sleeping on laundromat floors in Hollywood just waiting for their big break, right? The movie industry is notoriously hard to get into, and if anyone listening is struggling and trying to follow that dream and it's not working out, one thing I want to say that I have found a lot of comfort in this phrase, even though it's sort of stark, is it's not a meritocracy. If you're not being picked up, it's not because you're not great, right? It would be amazing if we could somehow objectively say that the best person who auditions for each role is always going to get picked, and the best writer is always going to get published, and the best, whatever you are, best musician is always going to get a top 40 hit. but it's just not the way it works.
Hmm.
There are so many people who are so talented and so good at the things they do that, yes, you have to work hard. Yes, you have to be great. But if you've put in that effort and you're not getting results back, that is not a problem with you. That is not a reflection on your capabilities. It just means there are other factors at play, right? If you think of it from if you're trying to break into Hollywood as an actor, right? Think about it from the casting director's point of view. I have to fill this one role. I've got 300 people to choose from who all read the exact same lines and all looked pretty much the same and all were really excellent. How do you make that decision?
Yeah, and they were probably hungry at the time. Like, all right, let's just get this dude out of here. Like, there's a million.
It's not going to be any objective factors. And it's not the case that if you work harder, it's going to work out for you, right? There's always an element of luck. There's always an element. People love to talk about who you know, but even that's not simple enough, right? There's so much of being in the right place at the right time, catching a person in a particular mood. And I can tell you, as a person whose novel has been rejected more than 200 times, that rejection never feels better. It never hurts less, right? The amount of work I put into my novel is immense, and it amounted to basically nothing. Meanwhile, Joan of Arc is just skating along on. I don't know how. I don't know why. I can't give you a piece of advice that's like, oh yes, here is the formula for success in a creative endeavor, right? It just this is the nature of the world. It is hard and it's unpredictable. But if you have something you love to do, you should absolutely stick with it. But for me, like, I do one thing for my work. I do a different thing for church. I also have my family, and this Joan of Arc project is this other thing. But it's not, if it crashes and burns, I've got 3 other very, very fulfilling aspects of my life to keep me afloat, right? And I think there's something to be said for diversifying and keeping yourself open to a variety of opportunities, right? If you are that person who's sleeping on a laundromat floor hoping for your big break in Hollywood or the music industry or whatever it may be, like, what does that mean for your ability to have lifelong relationships? What does that mean for your ability to have a meaningful faith or worldview? What does it mean for your ability to support yourself and have a roof over your head and have meals at the end of the day, right? Because those things matter too. And I think to be a whole human being, you can't let your identity get reduced down to one thing, especially one aspect of yourself that you're asking other people to judge. Because at the end of the day, their opinion is wrong. Your opinion of yourself is the only one that matters. Yeah. If you like yourself, doesn't matter if anybody else dislikes you. If you dislike yourself, doesn't matter how many people love you. It's never going to fill that hole in yourself. And so I'm never going to tell anyone to stop trying with their creative endeavors. I understand the inability to give up on something even when all hope seems lost. And I think that's admirable, and I think that's great. But I think it can become dangerous when it's all consuming, and that is how you measure your own worth. Because whoever you are, you're innately valuable as a human being, even if your artistic career never gets off the ground, right? And I think that is a hard balance to hold, to be able to say, like, I'm going to go all in on this. I'm not going to brace myself for it. I'm just going to go at it whole hog. But at the same time, if I crash and burn, I'm still going to be okay with myself, and I'm going to still have things to live for. It's a lot. It's a lot to hold. But I think that is the balance we all need to strive for.
Man, there's a lot of reflection in that. Like, there's the part of it is like that life of projects. The part of it is diversifying your value, your interests. And like, I like how you said, as we approach like these creative endeavors, right, or professional endeavors, the quote success, it's not about us, right? There's a million other factors at play. So don't let an opinion of others determine your opinion of yourself. Like, your self-worth is determined by what lights you up and brings you passion. And I love how you approach these things. You're open to it. If one thing goes down, we've got other things that'll help us back. I hope that people take away from this conversation that when you're good, good things happen. I actually looked it up because my grandma used to say this thing in Yiddish. The translation is man plans and God laughs. And in Yiddish, it's man tracht und Gott lacht, right? And it's just that we make plans and God just laughs. So it's like, that's great that we have a plan, but it's like, you never know what's going to happen, right? Never when you're
good or bad.
Right. I mean, again, as you said, bad things happen to good people and it happens every day. But there is, when you were Cinderella scrubbing stairs, when you were scrubbing toilets, when you were picking out the comment card, from the open mic show, when you were sitting in people's homes during your mission. Did we ever think we would end up here where we are at today, which is Wednesday, August 21st at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, talking about you making a Joan of Arc musical and having thousands, hundreds and thousands of people support you with money to do that? The Kyle back then, I don't know if he would have said that's going to happen, yet here we are. So I think it's about embracing life. I interviewed a guy yesterday, Dan Mott, like marketing ops guy, Dan Mott and Mike Rizzo.
I know Mike Rizzo. Yeah.
Dan had this wonderful thing. He said, the meaning of life is to find meaning in life.
Yeah.
And I think what I hear and what I'm learning from you as my friend is like, go for it. Don't be worried. Take the leap, take the chance. People will believe, people will follow if you're good, if you have your heart in the right place, man.
Yeah.
Go.
I need to hop for another meeting, but I want to tell you this last thing. So I will make myself late, and that's totally fine. Something I think about a lot. I was a pretty cautious kid, especially when it came to physical things. And I have this one memory of I'm following my big brother around, and there's this fence, and he runs at it, and he just like hops over it, right? And I run at it, and in the couple of seconds before I get to it, I have the thought of like, oh no, what if I don't make it? And so I put on the brakes, but because I put on the brakes, I'm now going too slow to hop over it, and I just crash into the fence, right? And I think that fear of failure, that unless you can run at the fence with all your strength, you're destined to fail. And if you run at the fence with all your strength, you still might fail, but at least now there's a chance of success. I think there's something powerful and metaphorical. Yeah. I don't know exactly what it is, but I think the more caution you take and the more you try to wrap yourself in bubble wrap so the thing doesn't hurt, the more likely you are to actually have the accident you're trying to avoid because you're sort of fixated on it. So that's just my last tangent there.
Kyle Jepson, I love you, buddy. We should all be running at the fence at full speed is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
What should people do? People that are listening, should we go to your YouTube channel? Google what do we need?
I honestly, you are welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. I always love that. LinkedIn for me mostly is HubSpot stuff with occasional Joan of Arc updates. If the Joan of Arc stuff is really what you're curious about, YouTube is the better place. I have a channel. It's just my name. But if you search for Joan Deserves a Musical, I'm pretty sure I'm the only person sharing that message. There's like 28 episodes now. Hop on in. The water's fine. And I would love to have, I get like 6 listens on each of those videos. Love to see that number tick up a little bit.
All right, man. Well, Kyle, thank you for making the time. I will see you in less than a month in Boston. Best to you and the family. Much love, buddy. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks so much to you. This has been great.
Awesome, brother.